Cool, I like the little details. They're what get me. Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Jessie, and today we are planning my April TBR. Before we get started, I have a few things I wanted to tell you about. First, I think it's been almost 2 weeks since my last update or upload. I got hit by a little bit of a reading slump in the middle of March, which led to a little bit of a content slump. And at this point in time, I haven't finished my March TBR yet, so I'm not quite sure where I'll be on that, which leads me to my next note. Please come back next Tuesday for my March reading wrap-up to see how I actually did my March TBR. And now, before we get into the actual content of today's video, please feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel to make finding my content every Tuesday and every other Thursday just a little bit easier on yourself. The funny thing about my April TBR is that 3 of the books on this list were books that were all mentioned in my most anticipated reads of 2021 video that went up at either the end of December or the beginning of January. I don't quite remember. So I think it's funny that I'm finally getting around to quite a few of those books. I think there were only like 10 on the list to begin with, maybe 15. And so I'm getting to 3 of them in 1 month, hopefully. But anyways, the first book on my April TBR is Yolk by Mary H.K. Choi, which before we get on to the actual content of this book, I love Mary H.K. Choi's covers. Like, look at that. And then also the hardcover is pretty cool too. I don't know if you can quite see the outline that matches, you know, the front, but it's awesome. It's very cool. I like the little details. They're what get me. But anyways, Yolk follows 2 sisters, Jane and June. They are 3 years apart. They moved from Seoul, North Korea to San Antonio, and now they're living in New York. And they were always really close growing up, but something happened, I guess, and now they're not close anymore. So at this point in time, Jane, I believe, is the oldest, and she has a finance career. She has a good job. Things seem to be going okay for her. And June is still a college student, and she's kind of like living that cheap college student life. She, you know, doesn't have a lot of nice things, I guess. I'm assuming her apartment's not as nice as Jane's. And her and Jane, I guess, really aren't close anymore. They're not really, I guess, even on speaking terms based off the summary. But all of a sudden, Jane gets diagnosed with cancer, and June is somehow the only one who can help her. And I guess it's about them reuniting and fixing their relationship. I'm really excited to read this book. I loved Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. That was an amazing book. Or then I liked Permanent Record, but I didn't love it. And so I have pretty high hopes for this book though, because both of Mary H.K. Choi's last 2 books that I read were really good. But I did love one a lot more than the other, so I'm excited to see this one, and I really hope I love it. The next book on my April TBR is All the Tides of Fate by Adeline Grace, and this is the second book in the All the Stars and Teeth duology. I don't really know how to describe this book without potentially spoiling the first book, but basically, Amor made it home, and she's ruling her kingdom, but things aren't going great. There's some issues because of how some things happened at the end of the first book. And now Amor must kind of go off on a trip, I'm assuming with like her same group from the first book, to kind of save the kingdom and herself. I'm really excited about this book. I've been really interested in duologies lately. The next book on my list is another duology, and this is Cast in Firelight. It's the first book in, I think, the Wickery duology by Dana Swift. The next book, I'm assuming, will probably come out sometime next year, since this book just came out in January. This book follows Adria and Jatine. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing their names correctly. They are both heirs to their own kingdoms, and they're also betrothed. And I'm assuming they've either met each other as children, or they've at least heard a lot about each other, because basically they hate each other and they're betrothed. And so now they've both been away from their homes for a very long time. I'm assuming with their education, they both have magic. However it's going to work in this world, I don't know yet. But they've been away from home for a good bit, and they're getting ready to go home, but there's some threat to one or both their kingdoms, and they end up working together to save their kingdoms. The issue is that they're working together under different identities. They don't know who each other is. They're not aware that they are both working with their hated betrothed. So I'm interested to see how this one goes. I'm actually really excited for this little duology. The fourth book on my April TBR is The Final Revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton. And I'm really interested in this book because I've kind of heard it compared to Daisy Jones and the Six, which I haven't read, but I've heard great things about. This book follows Opal and Nev, but I think it's primarily comes from Opal's point of view. She's a black girl in the 1970s, and she ends up going to New York, and she meets this guy named Nev, and they start a band together. And they have, like, I guess, a good band for a while. But then another band under their record label shows up with the Confederate flag, and Opal protests against it. And she's the one who's punished. And I'm assuming something happens and the band breaks up. And now it's 2016. Opal and Nev are considering a reunion tour. But before that happens, Opal kind of sits down for this interview, and I'm assuming the book is based off the interview, where she talks to the interviewer, I guess, about how the band started, what all happened, and some allegations that weren't originally mentioned at the time of the Confederate flag issue come up, and that's kind of where the story goes. Like I said, I've read this compared to Daisy Jones and the Six, which I haven't read, but I'm interested, and I'm really interested to see how this one goes. The final book on my April TBR is Disfigured on Fairytales, Disability, and Making Space by Amanda Leduc, or Leduc. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the author's last name. But this book is a nonfiction book, which I haven't read any of this year, and I kind of need to read a few because I don't like not reading any nonfiction at all. But in this book, the author kind of analyzes how disabled people are represented in literature, or especially fairy tales and stuff. And I think the author kind of looks at the Grimm's fairy tales and stories like that, and kind of talks about how, you know, disabled people don't typically get to see themselves as the hero or the heroine. So I'm really interested to see how this book goes and to kind of get on with reading some nonfiction for the year. Those are all the books I plan to read in April. Please let me know what you think of them if you've read them, just what your general opinions are. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And I will talk to you next Tuesday with my March reading wrap up.